people, kind of like plants. As babies, we're seedlings, and our parents are like our soil and water. Their balance and stability, or lack thereof, can have a significant impact on our health, happiness, and how we succeed in the art of living and loving. I was born and raised in Japan until I was 8. My mom was a Brooklyn-born Jewish hippie who loved Bob Dylan and had an interest in macrobiotics. My dad was a research student from Japan working as an engineer at a maritime institute in New Jersey. My parents met in an Aikido class. My mom liked to say that it was like love at first fight. My dad did not follow the typical path of the Japanese salaryman. Much to my grandmother's horror, he married an American. This was egregious to her, having lived through the war, but she came around when my brother and I were born because babies, am I right? Yes, we were that cute. My family was loving and affectionate, and life in the Miyoshi household was pretty idyllic at first. But school in Japan was extremely difficult for me. When I got to elementary school age, the kids who I used to be friendly with started calling me an outsider and excluded me, often telling me to go back to America. America. Japan was all I knew. America was a land that was as foreign to me as it was to them. It was so confusing to be made to feel like an outsider for reasons that were beyond my control. I think the hardest thing was watching my mother struggle to communicate with my teachers about my bullying. They were not helpful, and I could feel how powerless she felt. It was hard to see her like this because, in my experience, my mom was a dynamic, no bullshit person who made friends everywhere she went, even if they didn't speak her same language. She was an English teacher, a radio DJ, a martial artist, and an avid player and participant in music and the arts. There were many nights in our creaky old house where a troupe of Japanese bluegrass musicians would gather with their banjos and upright basses, and they would put plywood down on the tatami mats for the accompanying group of Japanese clog dancers, and they would dance and play music late into the night. My mom would make us go to bed, but sometimes I would sneak down the stairs and peek into the fun because I didn't want to miss anything. It was a land of magic. But as the years passed, the realities of growing a family in a foreign land, language barriers, and intensifying cultural differences, it started to create conflict and misunderstandings between my parents. To add further tension to the mix, my mom was very young when she met my dad, who was 13 years her senior. When you're a child, all you know is the land your parents create. All I wanted in my land was harmony, but that was not in the cards for our family. I was in the 3rd grade when my mother decided to take us in return to the United States. I didn't understand where the stability in my family went. Neither parent told us the truth about what was happening, although in their defense, maybe they themselves didn't know. What they did tell us didn't make any sense, and I felt like I couldn't trust the words and actions of the people I loved most in the world. Once in the States, my mother started nursing school. I remember quizzing her with note cards on organic chemistry in the car ride to school. And we often did our homework side by side at the kitchen table, her with her chemistry and me with my vocab words. We fell into a rhythm of living without seeing my dad more than once or twice a year, but I really missed him, and I wondered why we couldn't be with him. I think it's easier to get angry at the person that you're more comfortable with, so the immature narrative in my mind was, my mother's the bad guy who broke up our family. I was angry at her for bringing so much confusion and frustration into our family. But then I started growing up and getting into relationships myself. And I quickly realized it wasn't so black and white. Then my mother got cancer. I had to grow up even faster. By that point in my life, on my quest to make life as suffering-free as possible, I had gathered quite a number of tools in my toolbox. But nothing really prepared me for this kind of loss. I had to call on all my resources, inner and outer, to clear out as much resentment, hurt, and anger that I could, just so that I could be fully present with her in her final months. In this period of my life, I felt the most alive, the most tuned in, the most human, and the most present in my heart. Each second, each touch, each word was amplified and had more meaning than it ever had before. I was able to be with her with no reservations, and I had absolutely no regrets. Excuse me. I was alone with her, holding her hand when she passed away. I couldn't believe how this moment that I'd been dreading for months was so quiet. The energy that animated her body, her soul, was no longer there. The person in front of me that I knew but she wasn't there. There was no more boundary between us. She was everywhere, and she was finally free. For her memorial, I invited all the attendees to bring one flower that represented my mom to them. At the door, I had one professional flower arrangement, and next to it, an empty vase with their flower contributions. As the room filled, so did the vase. I remember a rose, a lily, a whole basil plant, a curly stem that made squiggly lines to the air, and a tall ginger plant. This vase became the most unique, quirky, beautiful, and wild bouquet. It was the perfect representation of my mom. Several people got up to speak, and the last person shared something that stunned me. She said that the reason my mother wanted to leave and move to the United States was because she did not like what was happening to me in Japan. My mom was not happy with the submissive girl who felt like an outsider that I was turning into. When I heard this, it felt like a whole chunk of my belief system, that part that said my mom was the bad guy who caused so much grief, just shattered. It's like watching National Geographic and seeing a piece of an iceberg just fall off and crash into the ocean. Hearing the truth about what happened instead of the story I made up about it, it felt like I was freed from all the weight that I carried with me. It was fun to bask in this new revelation while watching her 60 or so friends from different parts of her life eating, sharing stories, and celebrating her. All the seeds that my mom planted in these different relationships were now germinating and blossoming right in front of me. My dad was among these people, and I could feel how his heart was being healed as they all spoke with him. My parting gift to everybody was a heart-shaped seeded paper that they could take home and plant themselves. More seeds, more flowers from my mother. I feel her love coming through me now as I choose the seeds I plant in my life. And with as much presence as I can muster, I pay attention to the flowers that are growing in my heart and in the world.